You guys love sending questions and asking questions in classes. So this whole space tonight will be dedicated to just answering your Passover questions. I'm going to give it one more minute, let everybody get into the room. So the chat is open. And you are welcome to throw your questions into the chat. I thought we would start tonight by answering some questions that we already received via email in the last couple of weeks and even in the last day. So for those of you first coming in, I'll just reintroduce myself again. My name is Shannon Sarna. I'm editor of the Nosher. I'm very happy to be here. I've been running the Nosher for 10 years, and I'm joined tonight with a couple of my dear colleagues and my colleague Mira from My Jewish Learning, who's going to help field the chat. So feel free to put your questions into the chat. And I'm also joined by my colleague Laura Gottlieb and Sherry Silver, who both have various expertises. So hopefully you'll have lots of questions to throw. Okay, we have so many questions already. Let's go, rapid fire. Okay, what is a Sephardic macaroon? I have literally no idea. Mira, can you find, there is a article on the Nosher called like 7 macaroon recipes that don't use nuts. But I've never heard of a Sephardic macaroon. So if anybody knows the question, feel free to put it into the chat. I see a question. Can either or both dessert recipes be frozen? Can you specify what you mean by that? We're going to talk a lot about freezing tonight, I think, right? We love to talk about freezing foods. What can you freeze? When do you freeze it? Sherry, I know you're also very good at that. So I'll probably throw some of those your way. Okay. Let's start with some Passover dessert questions. This is my favorite topic. Dessert is my jam, pun intended. And I think there's limitations around dessert for Passover, right? And a lot rely on nuts and eggs. So if you have either an allergy or you just don't like those, it can be a little hard to work around. So without dairy and without chocolate, Jell-O, so good for Passover. Sherry, do you have any good ideas for a Passover dessert recipe without dairy, chocolate, that maybe coconut macaroons? What else would you say?
Without dairy or chocolate, like, are eggs involved? Can eggs be used?
I'm going to go with yes.
Then hands down, anything meringue, pavlovas, meringue cookies, anything that utilizes meringue. It's sweet, it's easy, it is 2 ingredients, egg whites and sugar, and it can be swirled with chocolate. It can be swirled with a quick compote that you make out of any fruit you have lying around. My go-to.
I love that. Great idea. You know, another dear friend of mine, Donna, she also, pavlova is her go-to. And we have a pavlova recipe from Lior Mashiachin, who's based in Israel, who's a pastry chef. So we can share the pavlova recipe in the comments. Eva. Hi, Eva. Nice to see you. I don't remember seeing you in the rest of the Passover classes. Is rice kosher? So confusing when you go to the store and mix kosher for Passover with kosher. Okay, so this is a great question, and I think this speaks to like a broader context of sort of like kashrut and Passover, which is just about the most complicated topic. So if you're going to do kitniyot or rice for Passover, and you want to make sure that it's kosher for Passover, what you're going to want to do is go to a kosher store, especially one that will have Sephardi products, and then you can get kosher for Passover rice. Otherwise, it's just gonna be rice, right? This is a judgment-free zone. Our family, we eat kitniyot. So, you know, you have to do what's right for you and your tradition. So I hope that helped answer your question. Eva, Cheryl wants to know, for Sonia Sanford's recipe, the matzah apple kugel, can you freeze it? I love it. Let's just keep talking about freezing. So I am of the mind for a matzah apple kugel that I wouldn't freeze that, because I'm not sure that matzah is going to freeze and unfreeze well. I see Sherry nodding her head, so I'm glad she's agreeing with me. So that's a dish I wouldn't freeze. A potato kugel, right? A potato kugel, I would freeze that. And some vegetable kugels I would freeze, but I wouldn't do that. What is the best way to dip macaroons in chocolate without having them crumble? Great question. I'm going to give an answer, but then I'm going to see what Sherry has to say because she's a master baker. So I would say that you want to pack your macaroons like a little bit when you're baking them, like you want them to hold their shape together, but also you want to let them cool completely before you dip them in chocolate. And then one other thing you could try is to chill them before you dip them in chocolate. But Sherry, I'm gonna throw this one over to you and see what you have to say because Sherry usually has a better answer than me.
You chill them. You could even freeze them. It doesn't take much. You just want to get it a little bit solidified, not frozen solid, because you don't want them to freeze and thaw, but just get them a little bit solidified in the freezer, and it will make all the difference. It's going to be a lot easier to handle, and you'll have a lot more intact macaroni.
Don't go anywhere because there's a next question from Maureen. Maureen had probably the most questions last night, Maureen. So you get a badge for that. Most questions in one class. I don't know what this is. Almond macaroons made with kernel paste instead of almonds. Do you know what kernel paste is?
No, I don't.
Oh, me neither. Maureen, send us a link. I don't know what that is. Oh, here we go. All right. Well, Andrew, let's think about this for a minute. You got invited to a vegetarian Seder on Friday. If anyone has any suggestions for dessert. This is not a problem. This is an opportunity. The vegetarian Seder. So it means you can pull out the butter. It's not a vegan Seder. If it's a vegan Seder, we're gonna have to throw this question over to Laura. So I would say if you're invited to a vegetarian Seder and you like this is the moment, and you should make any dessert that you want with butter and like whipped cream. Make like Sherry Silver's matzo tiramisu, for example, with whipped cream.
Or matzo crackers.
Yes, matzo toffee with butter. Yeah. All right, but let's just imagine for a second you got invited to a vegan Seder, right? And you need to bring a dessert for a vegan Seder, or someone is allergic to eggs. What can you make, Laura? What's your go-to?
My go-to 100% is matzo bark. And it's very easy to find vegan butter. There's loads of them now at every grocery store you go to. So you'd make it the same way that you would make non-vegan bark. And it's just as delicious in my opinion. Another good option, very chocolate heavy, but chocolate pudding is a classic Passover dessert that we make. And like use fruit, poached fruit crumbles with, some people will use like a matzah crumble or something if you'd like, but fruit heavy desserts. And there are also good vegan macaroon recipes out there as well.
Why didn't we have you make one of those? I think we're going to have to add that.
Yes.
Great. And that, that actually speaks to another question I saw Eva had. Eva was asking what you could do with the leftover nuts that you might have from making charoset. And I think you could use those nuts in like a fruit crumble topping, right?
For sure. Yes.
Right.
Yes, we definitely utilize a lot of fruit on Passover all week long.
Which probably is just as expensive as buying dozen after dozen of eggs.
Right. And we use just egg in a lot of replacement. We still do like fried matzah, things like that. But we also don't keep very strict kosher for Passover. I'm not sure that would, I don't know what's in it in a way that might not be strictly kosher for Passover.
Sure. So if you were making a vegan macaroon, what would be your suggestion for binding everything together?
I think, and again, this is not everyone's kosher for Passover, but aquafaba can be used, which is the chickpea goop, if there's not a better word for that. And that's often a binder, and again, dipped in vegan chocolate, which is very easy to find. Semi-sweet chocolate often can just be accidentally vegan. So macaroons are always a good option. And there's plenty of vegan macaroon recipes out there. They're very easy to find.
Great. That's super helpful. The aquafaba tip is a great idea. So for those who would eat kidney oat, aquafaba, just to reiterate, is the liquid in the can of chickpeas, and it can be made also to make like mousse. It can be
meringues.
Yeah. It's a
Yeah,
great
and it's
tip.
used in a lot of desserts as an egg replacer, and you whip it, and it becomes something you would not recognize out of a chickpea can. So
Now I just have Devo stuck in my head. Okay, sorry. All right, back to the questions. Barbara, I love this question. Where can I get great harissa in Manhattan? Not specifically a Passover question, but it's a great question. So there's a company based out of Brooklyn called New York Shuk, NY Shuk, SHUK, owned by a really lovely young Israeli couple. And you can buy their products in Whole Foods. Any Whole Foods will carry them in the spice aisle. And their harissa is, oh my God, it's the best. I couldn't possibly use anything else. They have matbucha. They have a whole line of spices. So highly recommend that. And they carry it even here in New Jersey in the Whole Foods. Is there a gluten-free matzah ball recipe? Excellent question. So two choices. If you do a Google, you can definitely find gluten-free matzo ball recipes. Mira, if you do a quick search on the Google, if you do a quick search on the Nosher, we have like a list of like 8 matzo ball recipes for Passover. Maybe we can share that link. I know it links out to a gluten-free recipe, but also there is gluten-free matzah and gluten-free matzah meal, and I've also seen gluten-free matzah ball mix. So there's no reason that you wouldn't be able to make gluten-free matzah balls. You might have to special order the gluten-free matzah ball mix at this point. I know some stores, depending on where you are, run out, but definitely available. Darlene, great question, a complicated question. Are beans allowed during Passover? So beans are what are beans, legumes, peanuts, mustard seeds, all kinds of seeds. There's a whole array of things known as kitniot. And for more Orthodox Ashkenazi Jews, they will not eat kitniot. Conservative movement goes up by that kitniot is allowed. For every family and person and community, your traditions can vary. So the short answer is yes and no, and it really depends on your tradition. Both my husband and I are from Ashkenazi families, but I have stomach issues. And so I decided many years ago that I had to eat kitniot because I wanted to be able to enjoy Passover, and eating legumes allows me to have a more comfortable week because Passover is the worst. Oh, Sherry. Yes, please. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Mira.
I wanted to go back to the vegan question. I believe flaxseed is kosher for Passover, is okay to use on Passover because you can make a flax egg. So I'll put in the chat what the recipe is for flax egg, but it's basically 1 tablespoon of flaxseed to 2 tablespoons of water for every egg. You mix it, it gets thickened. I wouldn't make, a very fussy, fancy dessert with it, but it is fantastic for vegan recipes when the only non-vegan piece is an egg. You can easily replace it with a flax egg.
All right, that's a really great tip, Sherry, as usual. That's why I saw you raise your hand, so I knew you had something.
I'll
Sherry,
put it in the chat now.
Well, while I have you, what do you make for your Seder?
So it's the law in my family. I make this flourless chocolate roulade. It is chocolate chips, eggs, and sugar, and it is huge. So it serves a crowd. It's a roulade, so it cracks as you roll it. So there's no stress about having this fussy, fancy roll cake. And it is everybody's favorite. So I make that, matzo toffee, of course. And I'm actually posting tomorrow a mocha ganache tart with a macaroon crust that I haven't made in years, and I've been craving it, and I'm going to be making that.
That was all dessert, so you're just like a pure dessert Seder?
Oh, you mean like regular food?
I mean, no judgment. Fine. That's an all dessert Seder sounds fantastic.
Well, yeah, so brisket, chicken, it's nothing like like you. To me, I get excited about the desserts. So yeah, but we have the full gamut of offerings.
I mean, I was going to invite myself over. All right, I see a question about a Sonia recipe. So we're just going to call her.
Hey.
Hey, Sonia, it's Shannon. How are you?
Good. How are you?
All right. First of all, we have lots of questions about your recipes. So clearly they made an impact in class last night. So Cheryl wants to know, Sonia says her potato kugel freezes beautifully. I believe it. Do you reheat it from the thawed state or from the frozen state?
From the frozen state, but either works.
Okay. She said, I don't know if everybody heard, but she said she does it from the frozen state, but either will work. So what like temperature oven would you put it in and for how long?
I think it's indicated in the recipe, but I think it's 350. And when I'm reheating it, depending how far I've cooked it the first time, so let's say I par cooked it like, 3/4 of the way. See, this depends on whether you're making mini kugels or big kugels. So my point is, you cook it till it's done, which is probably anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes.
That was super helpful. Somebody else wanted to. So did we hear that? Cook it till it's done. She's a true Jewish cook. Somebody else wanted to know if the blueberry snacking cake, do you let it cool in the pan or do you take it out of the pan to cool?
In the pan.
In the pan. So easy.
Yeah. It will fall apart if you try to take it out while it's warm.
It will fall apart if you try to take it out while it's warm. Okay. That's a super helpful tip.
Great.
Okay. Thanks for letting us call you, Sonia.
I love being like a live call-in on your class. Thanks for having me.
Anytime. I love hearing your voice. Hugs, Maya.
Okay, bye.
Bye. I will take any excuse to call Sonia. Thank you so much. I'm going to throw this question to Sherry. Can I swap potato starch 1-for-1 for cornstarch in baking recipes?
I'm going to say yes, if it's not too much. If the bulk of which it usually isn't, it's usually just a little bit of a binder. I would say probably up to like 1/4 cup, 4 tablespoons is probably good. You could also very, 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 very finely ground some matzah or matzah cake meal. It's all usually interchangeable. Again, I wouldn't make a full cake out of it if we're talking about a cup and a half. But if it's a small amount, yes, you can totally swap that.
I'm going to keep you on for one more second. Hope asked, will peanut oil work in most dessert recipes? What would you say, Sherry? Because I would err on the side of that sounds like I wouldn't do that, but
well, first of all, I would want to know what the recipe was, but peanut oil to me is like a cooking oil. I feel like other oils are more appropriate for baking, like grape seeds, safflower. I mean, I even use vegetable oil, olive oil. I don't know that I'd use peanut oil though. Again, if it was a small amount, maybe, but I don't know that there's a specific reason why you'd have to use that. So I would say
also like when you're baking, you typically want to use an oil that has a neutral taste or no taste, right? So
exactly.
If peanut oil can have a peanut taste.
Yeah, that's why I think that's why the other oils I mentioned, even olive oil, I'm on the fence with, but that's usually when you want that flavor. Otherwise, I tend to go with more neutral oils for baking.
Cheryl wants to know, can you double Sonia Sanford's apple matzah kugel and use a 9x13 pan? I love these questions. I think that what Sonia would say in this moment is that she's not sure. So I would just make 2. I would make 2 batches instead of doubling it, because when you start messing with the size of the pan, you're going to thicken or thin out how the consistency. Sherry, go ahead.
I wasn't in this class. So do you know what the size of the original pan is?
9x13. The original recipe calls for an 8x8 or a 6x12.
Okay. So, I mean, I've frequently doubled 8x8 pans
into a 9x13
because the area is very similar. So you would of course have to bake it longer, but you're gonna have an appropriate increase in volume.
Next question from Janet, can I eat quinoa during Passover? And I think we have some good My Jewish Learning articles about this. But yes, absolutely you can eat quinoa during Passover. Not even a complicated answer. Maureen wants to do flax seeds need a kosher for Passover hechsher. So my answer for this is going to kind of be generic for a lot of the questions. It really depends on your tradition, right? do you want all of your products to have a kosher for Passover texture? Like some people err on the side of every single thing has to, other than, meat and vegetables and fruit. I do not. So I think it's really, going to depend on what kind of community you belong to and what your own beliefs are. Okay, sorry, I'm scrolling down. Sarah wants to know about previous cooking classes. Yes, we had 3 other cooking classes in this series, and we do cooking series throughout the year, so usually around holidays, but we've had some other kinds of series also. So the videos from all of our classes will get sent out in the next couple of days. And also, keep your eyes peeled for the next time we do classes. I'm sure we'll do something sometime over the summer, and then always around the holidays in the fall and Hanukkah as well. Is cornstarch kosher for Passover? Great question. Corn is considered kitniot. So if you will eat kitniot, then you can have cornstarch. If you do not eat kitniot, then you probably don't want to use cornstarch, but you can use potato starch. Oh, I'm going to throw this one to you, Sherry. How do you freeze matzo balls?
That is a great question. Whatever you do, do not freeze them in the soup.
Good tip.
I would take a foil-lined baking sheet. I would put the matzo balls on the baking sheet, put them in the freezer, and then when they're frozen solid, you can transfer them to a Ziploc bag because then they'll stay intact. They're kind of fragile, so you want to give them a lot of TLC, freeze them in a single layer, and then you can put them in a Ziploc bag. They freeze beautifully that way.
Great tip. I never freeze matzo balls, but maybe I
always do.
You do?
I do.
Okay. Where there was a question about where can you find Dutch processed cocoa powder? Great question. In the baking aisle of supermarkets, you can typically find Dutch processed cocoa powder. I know that in Sonia's class, she specifically suggested Dutch processed cocoa powder. If you can't find it for whatever reason in your supermarket, I'm going to have to excuse myself for a second to let a dog in. You can certainly order it online. I'm also a big fan of Hershey's Special Dark Cocoa Powder. I think it makes really fantastic non-dairy desserts. Just to respond one more time, yes, the recordings for all of the classes will be available and will be sent out in an email. I'm going to go let my dog in, but I'd love to have Laura talk a little bit about some ideas for vegan and vegetarian friendly dishes you can have at your Seder, because those were questions that we've received a lot in the last couple of weeks. So Laura, maybe you could talk a little bit about what you serve at your Seder and some suggestions for people who might need some ideas. Excuse me.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest difficulties for vegans I have found during the Passover week is that matzo ball soup is very difficult to make vegan. There are some great recipes out there, but as there's always a debate about fluffy versus firm. There's really great firm matzo ball recipes out there with baked matzo balls or refrigerated for a very long time matzo balls. I am a fluffy matzo ball person and I've struggled to find that. But for matzo balls, there's definitely vegan recipes out there. But we'll often do like a sweet potato soup or a butternut squash soup for appetizers. We also do a vegetable kugel, very easy to swap vegan butter to make it, sometimes it's already parve, but to make it parve. And always relying on a big hearty salad. You can add in great avocado, lots of toppings, nuts, things like that to make it protein heavy and filling. For mains, we have done a chickpea brisket the last few years and it's been really, really good. Of course, the texture is not like brisket, but the taste, it's actually wild how similar it tastes like brisket if you use the same ingredients and stew it. And Smitten Kitchen has a really good chickpea brisket recipe and it makes the whole house still smell like brisket. It's amazing. If you like the texture, there's also jackfruit briskets out there that kind of get that pulled meat taste as well. And this year we're actually adding a kind of shepherd's pie dish as a main dish for our menu to kind of switch it up a bit. For sides, roasted vegetable everything, roasted carrots, roasted Brussels sprouts, roasted butternut squash with onions. There's a really great dish we do with that as a side. So I feel like sides is one of the easiest things because it's often just vegetables. Potatoes, roasted potatoes is a very easy vegan dish to make. If you just think parve for side dishes, it works out. And we already talked about dessert, but like I said, the matzo bark is always a winner. So,
is there a vegan butter that you particularly like recommend or like using?
Yes, and it is OU. It's the Country Crock has a new non-dairy line of butter. Absolutely incredible. They have an avocado one, an almond one, I think an olive oil one. My favorite's the avocado. It is like the creamiest butter ever. And it's been the first time that there's not kind of this, I love Earth Balance for what it is, but there's like a taste to Earth Balance. Country Crock does not have that. It is amazing and amazing for, buttered matzah. I highly recommend the Country Crock, specifically the avocado oil one.
I'm going to have to try that one. I've been using the Trader Joe's vegan butter and I really liked that.
Yeah.
But I haven't baked with it yet, so I'll have to experiment.
I found baking with the Country Crock has been amazing. And it can be found in, local to me, Meijer, Kroger. It's kind of all of the grocery stores that you would find butter in. The Country Crock seems to be there.
Edna, sorry, there was a question about vegan butters being kosher for Passover. I to my knowledge, their Fleischmann's is the one that is most readily available that is strictly kosher for Passover. I'm not sure if there are others that are kosher for Passover. Do you know, Laura?
I don't know that the Country Crock would be kosher for Passover. Yeah. I have a feeling it's not, but again, we don't eat kidney oats, or we do eat kidney oats, so we don't worry as much about what's in that one.
Yeah. I hope that helps, Edna. So if Fleischmann's is the one was kosher for Passover, but usually the products that are strictly kosher for Passover, if you have a supermarket it'll be marked off in a section. There's a question I'm going to throw to you, Sherry, because you're probably more familiar than I am. Can you use tapioca starch as a replacement for potato starch? And if so, is it a 1-for-1 replacement?
I don't know that I would use tapioca starch because it can thicken things. So it has kind of a different reaction, especially when it gets liquid. So it might, again, not knowing how it's being used and how much is being used. But I would say my kind of gut reaction would be not tapioca because that has a totally different application.
There's a question that, Mira, I'm going to ask if you can find an article on My Jewish Learning that can help define kidney oat in a more technical way than I will. So just to repeat, kidney oat are certain kinds of foods that have been prohibited years and years and years ago because they expand. So they sort of give the impression of leavening or rising, and so so they're legumes, peanuts, chickpeas, seeds, peas, corn. There's a whole range of them. I know that my colleague just shared an article in the chat that'll probably be more helpful than what I can share. But basically, the other part to know is that just within the last few years, the conservative movement in the United States said kidney oat is now allowed. We're going with kidney oat. So the question becomes a little bit more maybe grave for some people who may belong to conservative communities, but it might have been their tradition for all these years to abstain from those foods. So it's a very personal community, family by family sort of decision if you are going to eat kidney oat or not eat kidney oat. So of course, it's much easier if you do. It opens you up to a whole world of products. But of course, if that's your tradition, full respect. Everyone has to do what's good and right for them. Thank you. Somebody just chimed in. Okay, so we've gotten through a lot of questions. If I haven't gotten to your question yet, please feel free to chime in. Somebody said, how much ahead can you make? Can you make sandwich apple matzo kugel and leave it in the fridge? I would say 2 to 3 days. You're probably safe. I mean, I think that's generally a good rule. Seders are Friday and Saturday night, so probably Wednesday is a perfectly good day. It looks like there's a very specific question about a recipe. Okay, 2 different fats used in this recipe. Okay. I'm just making sure I'm answering this. So for the Passover rainbow cookies that are my recipe, when I make them, I use butter in the cake dough. Rainbow cookies are not really cookies at all. They're actually cake, very, very thin cake. And they're very friendly for Passover because there's very little flour in them. So the Passover version is half almond flour and half matzah cake meal. And then I use a shortening or vegetable oil in the melted chocolate because it helps it will help the chocolate melt and be smooth and be shiny. You could use butter in that, but I always use a vegetable-based shortening or oil when I'm doing it. So that's the answer. Margarine bakes better. The oil will create a sheen, allow you to spread the chocolate on top and on the bottom. That's the reason why. And then looks like there was another question about the almond butter chocolate chip cookies. It's a very deceiving recipe. It's almond butter or another nut butter, an egg, vanilla, chocolate chips. I think there's a pinch of salt. Maybe there's some sugar. That's it. The almond butter and the egg are going to basically bind it. And it feels like there's something missing there, but it's not. And they're really delicious. And they're super, super, super easy. And you can make them all year. So you don't have to make them with almond butter. You can make them with cashew butter. You could make them with peanut butter if you wanted. Okay. All right. So I think we've now gotten through a lot of the questions. So I wanted to throw out a couple of questions that we received over email as well, because I think that might be helpful. The first one I'm actually going to talk about with Sherry. We got a question about Passover rolls, right? Which kind of sounds like an oxymoron. What do you mean Passover rolls? But there's actually a kind of Passover roll made with matzah meal that is very popular and can be made like very airy and light, almost like a popover, like a little sandwich. So we got a question about how to create that. The person was asking about how you could have like a hole in the middle, almost like a sandwich. So Sherry, could you talk a little bit maybe about popovers and how you would approach making this kind of recipe?
So, I mean, full disclosure, I've never tried that, but I can explain sort of the science of popovers and how it might, have that effect, that the person was looking for. So this is a popover pan, and it is not, I mean, I've seen recipes where it's like, or a muffin tin. It's not going to give the same results because as you can see, each cup is fully separate, and so air circulates all around. Where this is really important is because what creates that hole in the center is steam. So you're actually going to put butter, or I guess in this case margarine or a non-dairy substitute, into each of the wells, put it in the oven. Then when you pour the batter in, the butter steams, and that steaming action pushes through the batter. I'm doing such a non-scientific explanation, but you get the gist. And that's why popovers are so airy inside. It's because of that steam that you can only get with a pan like this. It might be somewhat similar in a muffin tin, but if you really want that lovely rise, it's worth it to invest in the popover tin.
I love a good popover. I'm going to share in the chat Sonia's recipe for popovers, which are not made in a popover tin, but I think you probably could for extra lightness. I've made them for my family. I like them. My family didn't eat them. Go figure. My family loves matzo brie for breakfast, for Passover breakfast. Sherry Silver.
I also wanted to throw out there, and I don't know if it's going to come up, and you can find a million recipes for it, but cloud bread. Laura, I don't know if you've ever made it with cream cheese and egg whites. It creates this, it looks like a very flat pita, and you just sort of dollop the batter onto baking sheet and bake it, and then you can treat it like French toast. You can treat it like a little sandwich bread, but that is a great Passover option because it's completely flourless, and it's called cloud bread. If you look it up, there's lots of recipes.
Hey, Laura, would you mind grabbing the Smitten Kitchen link for the chickpea brisket and sharing it in the chat? Someone would love to have that, love that recipe. And I think that sounds delicious, right? Because like the sauce is so much of like what we love and where all the flavor comes from. So I think we've gotten to almost all of the questions. So if there's any other lingering questions, we can answer them. One question that nobody asked, which I almost inevitably get an email or a text about, or several, is how much brisket do I need to buy per person, right? Like how much do I buy, right? I'm going to say that the rule is about 1/3 pound per person. Sherry, would you agree with that? Oh, wait, we have to unmute Sherry.
All right. I just made a brisket, and my husband was looking at me slicing. He's like, "That's not enough brisket." Like how? I mean, and it's like, oh, we always seem to get the same size brisket. I use my biggest pan, and I would say that I agree with you in terms of the math, 1/3 pound, but it also is based on what else is being served. Like if that's the only main, you're going to need more. We get a couple of, Costco chickens or rotisserie chickens to round it out, and that makes a huge difference. Because also, like once the brisket gets too big, I don't know, I feel like it loses something, in the cooking, unless you were to do, I guess, 2 pans. But
yeah, it can be very hard if it's too large to cook it, and I hate cutting a brisket. We usually do at least 2 main dishes. Sometimes 3 main dishes, like a fish, a chicken, and a meat. I see a question about how far in advance can you make gefilte fish in the chopped liver. The chopped liver, I do like to do closer to the Seder because I feel like liver has a little bit like shorter shelf life in the fridge, and it like tastes better a little bit fresh. Like you don't want to make it the day of, but probably like the day before is probably a good rule. Sherry Silver.
Laura, I'm sure you can weigh in on this, but I just discovered an amazing recipe for vegetarian chopped liver, which is just lentils, a ton of very cooked down onions, some other ingredients, and that freezes beautifully.
Laura, I love vegetarian or vegan chopped liver. I've had some really delicious ones. Laura, do you make one ever?
Actually, my mother-in-law has been making a vegetarian chopped liver for years, and so when me and her son went vegan, she adapted it and made it a vegan chopped liver. So I can get the recipe from her and send it along, but it actually comes from her every year. So
that's so nice. That's lovely.
Yeah.
Question about, I'm going to scroll up because I saw a bunch of questions. Okay, so first of all, I saw a question about dishwashing soap. This gets into a whole area of kashrut that I cannot comment on. Like, this is like, I would say like, if you're concerned, I would reach out to a rabbi, or you could also write somebody at My Jewish Learning and they might be able to direct you to the right person. I just don't know the answer. And I'm sorry about that. So sorry, Carol, there was a question about cloud bread. Yes, cloud bread, Google it.
I've got a link. I can put the link in.
Yeah.
In for you.
That would be great. Question about freezing brisket. Great question. I can't believe we haven't had more freezing questions. When freezing brisket, can it be hot or wait for it to cool? And do you freeze it with the juice? So I'm going to say that the rule of thumb for freezing anything is that you always want to allow it to cool completely before you're going to freeze it. The question about confusing it in the juice or not, Sherry, I'm going to throw that to you.
I'm just putting the cloud bread link in. So I mean, best practice, in my opinion, is you make the brisket, you let it cool completely, then refrigerate it overnight, slice it cold, put it back in with all the juices. You could even put it in like a nicer, smaller pan or whatever, and then you freeze it. But you absolutely freeze it with the gravy, but I like to refrigerate it overnight. It makes it a lot easier to slice. And then you kind of like fan out the slices a little bit like a deck of cards, and you put the juices back over it and then freeze it. That makes it perfect every time.
And then if you put it in a Pyrex dish, you can freeze it in a Pyrex dish, and then what you could just reheat it back in the Pyrex dish. Or
I put it when I slice it, I put it into the dish I'm going to serve it in, and then that's one less thing to deal with.
That is a great tip. This is why you're here. I would say no, why are you freezing it? That's crazy. I don't freeze anything. But I know that's the wrong answer. It looks like there were some questions about lentils and rice. Yes, they are kidney oat. Rice is sort of in its own category, as my understanding. There are people who will eat kidney oat, and then there are other people who will also eat rice. Again, these are according to your personal customs. There's no right or wrong. It just depends on what rules that you want to follow. Okay, did I get all of the questions that came in? I see a question. Can regular sugar replace confectionery 1-to-1? I mean, this definitely depends on what you're talking about, but no. Confectioner sugar and granulated sugar are not the same thing, but Sherry's going to give you an even better answer than I'm going to give you. So I'm going to throw this to her.
So, I mean, this is obviously a big issue because the confectioner sugar, is technically, kidney because of the cornstarch, but you can grind granulated sugar down very, very fine. Again, would I make, a fancy souffle, or, you do something that's very, very fussy and fragile? No. But if you need some confectioner sugar, just grind up. You'll have to keep measuring to make sure that you've got the appropriate volume. So you just grind your granulated sugar and then just keep measuring it up until you have the same amount. It works perfectly.
But don't go anywhere, because I saw another question I'm going to throw to you. Just to go back to the question about the brisket and freezing, would you then, since you put it in a dish that you're going to serve it in, would you reheat the frozen brisket from the frozen state, or would you thaw it in the fridge first?
You would thaw it. I'd usually take it out. I mean, you could. It just takes so long, and you've got so much going on that day that that's tricky timing. So the answer is yes, you could do it straight from the freezer. Take it out the day before, and then I would even let it sit out at room temperature for at least 30 minutes to give it a head start in the oven. Again, it's now nice and sliced and not all one piece, so it's going to reheat beautifully and relatively quickly. Put it in the fridge the day before. Some people don't have the room, and I get that. If you don't have the room and it has to stay in the freezer, just a lot for that time.
Thank you. That's really helpful, Sherry. I saw some questions about can you have kosher for Passover confectioner sugar? Absolutely. Go to a store that has a big kosher selection, kosher market, or on Amazon. You'll be able to find kosher for Passover confectioner sugar. Absolutely. Best time to slice a brisket. Like Sherry said, you really want to slice it cold, or at the very least, really come down room temperature, because you have to, when you're slicing it, which of course you're slicing against the grain when you're slicing a brisket, if it's too warm or still hot, it's going to fall right apart, and you're not going to get those really nice clean cuts. So the best approach to the brisket is definitely make it 1 to 2 days beforehand. Let it cool completely, put it in the fridge, and then when it's cold, take it out, slice the brisket, and put it back into its juices, and then reheat it that way. So that's really your best bet. Sometimes, of course, time doesn't allow that, but number one, you have to make sure that the brisket cools before you can slice it. All right, we're at 8:20. So we just have a few more minutes left, and we've had so many great questions. We've had no substitution questions, so I'm not sure if you guys are feeling okay, if you got all your substitution questions out during our Passover classes. Is everybody all right out there? Last chance, vegan questions, vegetarian questions, dessert questions. Laura, we talked a little bit about your meal. Do you have a set menu this year? I'd love to hear it.
Yes, I am very excited. We just created our menu a couple days ago, which is a little short notice for people who are bringing things. But we have, like I mentioned, a big salad coming from my mother. We are doing, right now, we're going to test out a new matzo ball soup recipe. And if it doesn't work, we have a backup of lentil soup, which again is what we do for our tradition. And then I'm making a vegetable kugel that is veganized from a family recipe, which basically just means vegan butter. And we're of course going to do the chickpea brisket, potentially making a side of the shepherd's pie. And then 100% for dessert, we're doing the matzo bark. And if we're feeling up for it and have energy after that, we'll make chocolate pudding because it was a crowd favorite last year. And that's our Seder.
I bet the shepherd's pie is going to be delicious. What's the base of it?
Mushrooms and I think lentils and carrots, and then a nice heavy layer of mashed potatoes.
That sounds delicious.
Yeah, I'm excited.
I see a couple more questions that just came in. The shepherd's pie recipe is not yet available, but we're gonna have to have Laura type it up. All right, there is a question. Hold on, we're gonna call a kashrut expert. So if I'm gonna ask for my friend Eva a question to my Rabbi Jesse.
Hello.
Hey, Rabbi O, how are you?
How are you?
I'm good. You're live in my Passover Hotline class right now.
Oh, exciting.
Just the phone call that you wanted at 8:20 on a say Monday or Tuesday.
I don't know. It's all a blur.
Do you know offhand, is Truvia kosher for Passover?
Is Truvia kosher for Passover? What is Truvia? Truvia is stevia, or is it something different?
I think so. It's a sugar replacement.
I don't know exactly what is in the sweetener, because I know certain sweeteners like Sweet and Low go out of the way to have a kosher Passover symbol on it. I'm not sure what the sugar replacement is. Any of those sugar substitutes, I would recommend finding one that has a kosher Passover symbol on it.
Okay, that's really helpful, Eva. I hope that helps you with the answer. Thanks for letting me bother you twice in one day.
It's always my pleasure and never a bother.
That's what you say, but food questions. But if it's other questions, you'll have to get back to me.
Well, that's what I say when other people are listening and I'm on a hotline.
Fair enough. All right. Thank you, Rabbi. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Did you hear what he said? He said he only says that because everybody else is listening. Okay, sorry. I saw a couple more questions coming in. I'm just not a kashrut expert, and I hate to give firm answers on any of these things. It looks like I have a couple more questions for Sherry in here. So is gluten-free matzah meal a 1-to-1 replacement for matzah meal? I would say yes, but let's see what Sherry has to say. The next question for Sherry is, when you unthaw frozen cake, do you do it in the fridge, and do you leave the plastic wrap and tinfoil on or take it off?
I'm going to assume we're talking about not a frosted cake, because those typically are not Passover cakes. So what I would do is I would, again, we're talking about taking it out of the freezer. How do we defrost?
Yeah.
Okay. I would take it out of the freezer. If it is, I'm going to just use a bad example because you wouldn't make this during Passover, but like a honey cake, which is very sticky, I would unwrap that and thaw it unwrapped. If it's more like a pound cake that's more smooth and solid, you could keep it wrapped. So if it's more sticky and moist, just let it thaw unwrapped. It can stay wrapped if it's more of a firm kugely type of cake.
How far? So somebody has a question about haroset. And two different kinds of haroset. One is the Iraqi haroset that Vered Gottman made the other night. For those of you who might have joined for the class, it was so great. And I specifically asked Vered this question: how far in advance could you make this? Because it's just two ingredients. It's walnut and Ceylon. Ceylon is date honey. And Vered said you could make it several days in advance and leave it out. You don't need to refrigerate it. Or you could make it right before the Seder, it would be fine. How far in advance, though, can you make it like an Ashkenazi apple walnut haroset? And I'm going to ask Sherry what she thinks about this. I would say I would make it one day ahead of time. Well, what would you say, Sherry?
We have made it up to like 4 days ahead of time. We use, very firm apples, and you would think that it wouldn't hold up, but we've been making the same haroset for decades, and we never do it the day before. We do it at least 2 to 3 and sometimes 4 days in advance, and it just holds up, it stays perfectly. All that.
That's great to know, because it's such a big meal, right? Like, which parts of it can you make in advance and when? It looks like we're dwindling down to the last couple of questions. Mira, I think that there was a vegetarian matzo ball recipe that I had shared in some of the links. So I'm going to ask Mira to share a chicken soup recipe. It's a vegetarian chicken soup recipe. You can ignore the matzo ball parts because somebody asked for a vegan chicken soup. So you can just make the broth, which I believe is totally vegan friendly, and I'm sure very hearty and delicious. It's from these two food writers who are sisters, and they have fantastic recipes. Somebody had asked a couple of times about using kosher for Passover baking powder as a leavener and sort of comfort level. And I'm going to go back to sort of what I've said about kidney oat, right? If you feel uncomfortable with using that because it's not in your tradition, don't use it. Rely on desserts that don't need it. Like a chocolate mousse, Laura was saying a chocolate pudding, matzo toffee, macaroons, a sponge cake, things that are going to rely on eggs versus, a leavener. So, I think it's really up to you. There is kosher for Passover baking powder. For me, I'm embracing it. I'll use it. I love it. But you have to do what's comfortable for you, right? So at the end of the day, like, what is going to make you feel connected and be a delicious holiday. I'm really tired of talking now. Well, this looks like another question for Sherry. I think someone is asking about mandel bread falls apart when I slice it before toasting. What is wrong? What's wrong, Sherry?
That's a really hard one to answer. When I get baking questions, this failed, and you probe a little bit and you find that they didn't do this, or they skipped that, or they substituted something else. Because mandel bread it's almost foolproof. So I would say, knowing nothing about the recipe or the process, that it wasn't cooled down enough before slicing. That's one you really have to let it super cool before you slice it up, so it's nice and firm.
I saw one other question. I saw one other question about gefilte fish. So if you're, I can't speak to homemade gefilte fish because I never make it, but my sister-in-law's aunt makes it, and so when she's ready to make it again, I really I want to go learn with her. But if you're making the frozen gefilte fish from a roll, right, like you boil it or you simmer it in water with onions, carrots, and you let that cool and serve. So I would not keep it in the broth. If that's the question that someone asked me, I would make sure you actually really drain the excess liquid after you simmer it. I usually stick it in like a colander in the sink to make sure the liquid comes out. Otherwise, it just makes kind of a mess in your fridge. And then that is definitely the kind of thing that you can make 1 or 2 days ahead of time also, because you want it to chill before serving it. So I hope this has been helpful. I want to say a really big thank you to my colleagues, Laura Gottlieb and Sherry Silver, for helping answer these questions. Clearly, I could not have done it without you, and really appreciate you both being here and sharing your knowledge and lovely faces with us.
This was fun.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you guys for joining us tonight. Thanks for all of your questions. Thanks for all of your support. If you love our classes and you love the Nosher, and why wouldn't you? Because clearly we're amazing. Please consider making a donation to help support our work. 70 Faces Media is a nonprofit media company, and we appreciate every small and large gift. So if you've been part of our class series and you want to make sure they keep going, like, think of us as your personal, like, Jewish NPR with fun cooking classes and snarky hosts. And we would love to bring more of these to you. So thank you guys so much. Chag Sameach. We'll still be around for the coming days if you have other questions. And stay tuned for the recordings of all of these classes. Thank you guys so much. Mira, thank you so much for all your help.